There's no danger for another week. What's the thinking there?
Well, it'll be another 2 weeks because we have the bye afterwards. So, but we flagged for a long time that we'd be conservative. And look, he could play this week. He's been training really well. But we think in the context of the wider season that it's just best to hold him back and have him primed for the Carlton game, which he'll play. We're optimistic we might even get a couple back for that game. And look, this is an important game for us. They all are, but not as important as the 10 home and away games that follow our bye. We want to get ourselves in a position where we can really have a crack at the back half of the season, and holding him back complements that theory.
Was that a two-way conversation or a one-way?
No. It's always. Well, it's much more than two people involved. Like Pat's a little frustrated because he'd like to play, but completely sees the big picture. And it's not as if we don't have a precedent for this, not only with our broader list, but with him specifically. It's a similar model to the one we implemented in 22, and we're not saying that's how it's going to pan out, but we're saying we're trying to give ourselves a chance to do a similar thing.
You said he's changed a few things, Chris. Could you take us through what he's had to do to sort of change his technique and make sure it doesn't happen again?
Sorry, did he say that? I'm not quite across what he said. I think my assumption is he would have been referencing the mechanism by which he did the last injury, and that was kind of one of those situations where he was sort of diving on a ball and was in a position where, as it's been explained to me, that most players would do some damage if they found themselves in a similar position with a similar amount of force going through that hamstring. So I think he's just, my understanding on it, and I'm not down in the weeds in this, is just he's just sort of thinking through, ways he can have a similar impact in those ground level balls without putting so much stress on his body.
Have you had a look at how to address the start and making sure you don't give a team a couple of goals? I mean, it's probably too basic to just say you'll change one or two things, but have you delved into that aspect?
Yeah, we have, like in detail, and it's as there's the only consistent pattern has been that we've given the opposition goals early on. There've been some sort of clumsy free kicks and centre bounces and giving field position. There's been a few errors with the ball, and there's been some opposition good play as well. So I think we try to avoid a situation where we give instruction along the lines of, hey boys, we've got to start better. That's sort of try to give that up from under 14s, that sort of, and focus on the specifics and sort of the bits of our game that we need to implement to make sure the game's played a little bit our way. And that's not always reflected in an advantage on the scoreboard, but it's more just the overall. The thing that's concerned us is the overall way the game has looked has been a little bit more the way the opposition wanted rather than us. So it's a big challenge against a team that has pretty much had the game played the way they want it to be played for the whole season. So we're aware of the challenge, but we've also got a lot of confidence in what we look like when we get it played our way.
What would you like to see then?
Yeah, well, we'd love to win all the centre bounces early on and get the ball in our forward half. We'd like to see enough pressure on the opposition so they can't control the ball, and that's a real strength of Sydney's as well. They've got some really high quality players in and around the middle in the contested situation, but to a man those guys use the ball really well as well. So we think we've got some potency in our forward half, and we just like to put the opposition under a bit of pressure by getting some quality ball in there. So all that sounds like a generalisation, but it's probably as specific as I'm going to get.
Can you articulate how far off you are at the moment of where you need to be at the right time of the year?
No, I'd only be guessing. It's hard enough to work out exactly where you are relative to your capacity as a team, and it's impossible to then overlay where the other teams are going to get to. My observation would be that more and more it feels like a bit of a week-to-week proposition with a lot of teams. You can be, and we've been there. We would be an example. We started 7-0 and didn't really feel like we were, touching the ceiling of our capacity, even though the win-loss was looking really nice. And then particularly sort of, I reckon, 3 or 4 of the last 4 or 5 games, we just haven't played well at all in parts, but have still been good enough to get back into the game and have a chance to win. So I don't think that we were too excited early in the year, and we certainly haven't dropped our bundle in the last month or so. my guess is that it's going to take until the last sort of month of the season to sort of work out who's hot. I do think it's borderline impossible to be red hot for 26, 27 weeks in a row. Sydney are kind of challenging that notion, but they haven't played for a couple of weeks, so who knows where they're at as well.
Is the pressure and the ball movement you showed in the second half last week a bit more of a blueprint? Because it seemed to raise a lot after half time.
Yeah, it looked better than the first half, didn't it? And that's an obvious question to ask, and we ask it of ourselves as well. And look, you could probably have a look at the Port game where we got blown away a bit early, and then had the chance to win late, and you sort of ask yourself, why didn't the start look more like the end? And it's more complicated than just what we were doing. Yep. And I think the fact that I've referenced the difficulty of being consistent across the whole season, or at least being hot across the whole season, I think we're seeing that within games too. I don't know many teams that are able to just be absolutely peaking for the full 4 quarters. So the challenge there for us, because we've been almost the poster child for that, is just limit the damage when it's not going so well and maximise the advantage when you have it. Because I'm still really confident that in every game we play, we've got the capacity to really control games for decent periods.
You mentioned as well winning it at the centre, obviously the extended squad, but you've got Stanley and Conway in that with that ruck. Are they a realistic chance to both be playing, or you look at a 1 or a 2 kind of setup?
Yeah, no, realistic chance. We're still sort of working through it. And I think we've been as transparent as we can be with our ruck setup. Toby has played as much consecutive AFL footy as he ever has. Now that's only 4 games, but it's a lot for him. So there are not many 20-year-old first rucks in the competition that can sort of dominate or even play every week. And with his injury history, we're careful, but we think he played his best game, in my opinion, his best game of his career last week. So we're optimistic about sort of his trajectory, but it's nice to have Stanley back as well. So we're, again, think not just for this week, but post-bye, building towards getting good availability and having some options. And we plan to use those options. We're not going to decide who our best ruckman is and just play him every week. That goes for our 22 as well.
You feel like he pulled up well after that VFL, a bit like a half there, and strong performance from your perspective? Yeah,
so with Reece, he played a half, and we use that very much as game time for training purposes, rather than sort of assessing any performance necessarily. But he got through well and seems to be pretty good. So we've still got a bit more to work through before we get up to Sydney, but good to have options.
Shuffle the cards in the midfield just to combat a bit of speed, and a team that looks like they're pretty organised in there. Will you go to a few different lanes?
We were pretty good in the second half last week. I think there will be a time where we get Dangerfield and Guthrie back in there. They're, if they're anything like their best, they're locks in those roles. But the guys that we have available at the moment, to a man, if you sort of go through those guys from last week, Braun was very good. Holmes was very good again, as he has been all season. Jack Bowes is probably the best player on the ground. Blitzarves is coming back, and Clark will probably come back as well. So we think that while we've got a healthy sort of respect and admiration for Sydney's midfield, I don't think we've ever been intimidated by them, and I mean that with again the greatest respect for what they can be and what they have been this year. They've clearly been the best team in the competition, but there's no point us going up sort of being on the back foot, because those guys can beat you when everything goes well, but they'll certainly beat you if you're completely reactive.
How did you find the holding the ball adjustment?
Last night or the week before?
Oh, just in your experience, last night or the week before?
Yeah, I think my summary would be that the AFL communicated it really well. I think they would acknowledge it's not ideal having such a significant change halfway through the season, but if you are going to change something, communicate it well, give some examples, sort of acknowledge the situations, because all we're really after is, it's easy enough if you see all the decisions and you can adjust. The challenge is when you see decisions and they're not clarified that they're either right or wrong, and I think the AFL have done a pretty good job in this instance of doing that, and the players will adjust pretty quickly. Again, the change should be happening in October or November, not in June, but I think after a couple of weeks, everyone will have more clarity. So in terms of the change, I think they've sort of done pretty much everything they could to to implement that change well.
That's a nice little piece of headwear. Have you had any sort of experience with Neil this week? I know he's got around to a few of the clubs, and do you talk to the boys about what it means and just something a little bit broader than football?
Well, we talk about those things semi-regularly. I guess it's a core philosophy of ours that, we football at times is the most important thing in your life, but over the average of your time at the Cats, there are other things that trump footy, and this is sort of one of those things where you sort of get a bit of a reminder that while we can get stuck in the weeds and sort of focused in on our problems, there's a lot of issues out there that are a whole lot bigger than footy, and we're not standing here sort of proposing that we're fixing the problem, but if we can make a slight contribution to at least the awareness, then that makes us feel a bit better about ourselves.
Chris, can I just ask one back on footy? Is Jeremy Cameron been a touch off his tucker for 3 or 4 weeks? I know that his standards are very, very high, but is that fair to suggest?
He missed a week there.
Yeah. Has it been a result of that potentially?
Well, I mean, that would be pure speculation, that bit, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Right. So 3 or 4 weeks. He's probably, to my estimation, the best player in the competition for 3 or 4 weeks before that. So if you use that as a benchmark, he's probably come off a bit. How many has he played back? Has he played 2 back from the concussion?
My thinking was 2.
Richmond.
Giants. He played?
Yeah, so he missed the Darwin game. He's played the last 2 games here. And been by his standards a little bit off, but that's like by most people's standards, he's been a star.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, we'd like him to be the best player in the comp again pretty quickly. I think he will. But yeah, I sort of rail against the idea that you try to rewrite history to say if he's been a bit off, these are the reasons why. We see him every day, and even we don't know. But he's a bit similar to Tom Hawkins in some respects, in that we do ask them to play slightly different roles based on the opposition and based on sort of our other plans. But at least us on our other clubs are a bit more open about it. But we don't try to defend them by explaining what their role's been. We try to assess it a little bit more privately and thoroughly internally, and we think that he's going okay.
Could we see him a bit deeper on the small ground?
Well, I think just by virtue of the small ground, he'll end up deeper anyway. It's a short way home as long as you don't get stuck out too wide. But yeah, I mean, I am prepared to say that, in a perfect world, most weeks we would like him in a position where he can kick a lot of goals. So let's simplify it. We don't want him playing as a half-back flanker. We want him to be a forward half player.
Thanks, Chris.
You did have so many so many goal kickers in the end, and Dempsey pops up for 3 goals, pretty crucial in the game against the Tigers. Obviously playing a bit on the wing as well, but do you give him lessons to go forward to do that kind of creativity up forward? And obviously he's in great form this year.
Yeah, Ollie did a really good job for us because we didn't start the game well, and I don't think I'm being too harsh on Ollie to say he didn't start the game that well either, but we've got such confidence in him that pushing him forward a little bit, it's rare that you're sort of thinking, okay, what do we need to shift to get back in the game, and you go to your 20-odd game 20-year-old who hasn't had much of a footy background to go forward and try to shift it for you. So he kicked 3 1/4 and really changed the complexion of the game. So he's probably a bit like Jeremy. We like him up the ground, but we like him ahead of the ball as well.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
No worries.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys.